Welcome to our In Focus topic on the inclusion of LGBTQ+ students in Utah schools. Before we begin our discussion, we'd like to provide some background for you about our first guest by revisiting a report from 3 months ago. At the time, parents complaining about a book read in class about a transgender boy. ABC4's Jason Nguyen explains how the Murray School District responded.
A third grader brought a book to school called Call Me Max. It's not a book that's approved by the Murray City School District, but because a teacher read the book out loud, the district is now questioning its equity book bundle program and its equity council.
I find it really strange and upsetting, truly upsetting, that the Equity Council would be paused because of a book brought in from home. The Equity Council did not bring this book to school. I personally, as a parent, think it's a great book.
Murray City Council member Kat Martinez says she's fielding calls from constituents who are upset with the Murray City School District's decision to pause and suspend its Equity Council and Equity Book Bundles program over a book featuring an LGBTQ+ kid.
And by saying one thing happened that didn't even have to do with you, and we're going to pause your work, even if we're going to use the word pause, it sends a really terrible message.
A committee filled with parents and teachers will approve the textbooks and software programs. This includes the Equity Book Bundle program. Each item will go through the district's application process that's age appropriate and challenges students' literacy.
I hope that if it was just bad timing, that they will go forward with some really big policy shifts in hiring that equity director and giving more support.
Parents can fill out a form and ask the school to exempt their child from any required reading. The school can then waive the participation requirement, provide alternative literature, or require participation as originally assigned. District officials tell me many of the books on the Equity Book Bundle program are available in school libraries for students to check out. There's no timetable on when that program will be available or when the Equity Council will be back in action. I'm Jason Nguyen in Murray City, ABC4 News.
Welcome to our In Focus discussion in honor of International Day Against Homophobia, Transphobia, and Biphobia. Our segment tonight focuses on representation and inclusion of LGBTQ+ students in Utah schools. Joining us first is Kyle Lukoff, the author of Call Me Max, who is visiting Salt Lake City all the way from Brooklyn, New York tonight. Kyle, thanks for being here. We appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, before we get into your book a little bit more, could you share a little bit about your background and what led you to becoming an author for children's books?
Yeah, so pretty much my entire life has been books. So when I was 16, I got hired at Barnes & Noble, and then I worked at my college library, and then I worked at Barnes & Noble again. And then I went to library school, and I was the librarian at an elementary school in New York City for 8 years. And during that time, I thought about starting to write books. So my first picture book is called A Storytelling of Ravens. It's about collective nouns, and that came out in 2018. And as a transgender man, I decided that I wanted to try to write a book about not so much me and my life story, but really my community and the people that I see myself as coming from and being a part of.
Mm-hmm. Well, Barnes & Noble, definitely a good place to spend some time. I do a lot of that myself. Let's get into that book, Call Me Max. It was at the center of pushback from parents in the Murray School District back in February. We'll get into more about that in just a second, but first, can you tell us a little bit more? You already got into it a little bit, but dig into the book a little bit more.
Yeah, so Call Me Max is, first off, it is an easy reader or an early chapter book. So I wrote it with the literacy needs of approximately first and second graders in mind. And then the story is a fairly basic coming out story of like one young transgender boy, how when he was born, his parents thought he was a girl. And as he got a little bit older, he realized that that didn't feel right about himself. So he shared that with his teacher, he shared it with some of his new friends, and he eventually shared that with his parents. And his parents found him a support group, and Max made friends with other trans kids. And that's where the story ends. It doesn't have much of a plot.
And what's your hope in writing this book, and as people read it, what message do you want them to take away from that?
I want trans kids and their families and their communities to know that not only that they exist, but that they come from a real culture and that they have people in their lives who believe them and support them.
But what about those that hear it or read it outside of the trans community? What's the message you want them to take from this?
The message is that trans kids have books about them and that we exist and that we are as worthy to be in stories as any other kind of human being.
What was your initial reaction when you first heard about the pushback that the local district here received after a student brought your book to a class and asked the teacher to read it out loud?
Well, I wasn't surprised to hear about the pushback. I've been waiting for this kind of situation since my first trans picture book, When Aiden Became a Brother, came out in 2019, because I know that LGBTQ-themed kids' books are among the most banned or censored books of any kind of literature in this country. And I was mostly worried about the kid and mostly worried about the teacher and hoping that they had support that the kid had a supportive family, that the teacher had a supportive administration, because I wouldn't want anyone to be hurt because other people responded negatively to one of my books.
And did you have any follow-up on that, I'm curious, with the teacher or the boy by chance?
I did. I've been in touch with a lot of the people involved, and it's been really lovely for all of us.
How have those conversations gone?
Wonderfully. I mean, the kid is a kid. The kid is wonderful. The parents are lovely, and the teacher is an inspiration to me as a former educator.
So this incident hit the news, and you started getting responses. Talk about some of the responses you received and what they were all about.
I am happy to say that I only got a little bit of hate mail. I did not get any death threats, which I'm pleased by. I mostly got supportive messages from families, from other teachers, honestly from people all over the country who heard about it and found my work through this incident and are using this as a way to share my work with the kids in their lives who need it.
So as I mentioned, you're joining us tonight from Brooklyn, New York. So why did you decide to come to Utah and participate in the FAM Educators Rally, which is happening tomorrow?
Because I was asked to, and I was told that my presence would be helpful, and that is pretty much all I ever want.
Okay, what would you like to see moving forward done here in Utah for LGBTQ plus inclusion in schools?
I would like LGBTQ educators and students to be asked what they need and for them to be listened to.
Here in Utah, we have actually had some led out in LGBTQ issues. We had a non-discrimination law passed a couple of years ago, a big Supreme Court ruling in the state of Utah. When you take a look at Utah, do you see some good things that are happening here in our state for the trans community?
That is all that I've seen so far. I've been welcomed here, and I have gotten just the most supportive messages from people living here. So I know that that is not the entire picture for LGBTQ people living in Utah, but it is lovely to know that this community has a lot of support.
All right, really appreciate your insight. Thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for staying with us for our second In Focus discussion tonight on inclusion of LGBTQ plus students in Utah schools. Joining us now is Dr. Allie Martin, who is the Assistant Principal at Horizonte Instruction and Training Center in Salt Lake City. She is also the co-founder of Friends, Allies, and Mentors, also known as FAM. I referenced that a little earlier in the show, of the LGBTQ community. Dr. Martin, thank you for your time and participating in this conversation tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Some of the people who filed complaints to the Murray School District said they felt their parental rights were violated when the teacher read that book, Call Me Max, in the classroom. What is your response to that? Parental rights and the balance there?
Yeah, you know, I'm not only an educator, I'm also a parent, and I understand that it is my role as a parent to teach my child right from wrong and to make sure that she understands the beliefs that we hold as a family. But it's also well beyond my rights as a parent to erase another child's identity or to take away somebody's existence in the classroom just because I'm uncomfortable with it. So I think that that is not a fair interpretation of parent rights.
Some parents expressing that they felt there was a quote agenda being pushed by teachers in the schools. What do you say to that?
Again, I think that an individual student's identity, their existence, is not a political statement. That is who they are, and every child deserves to feel comfortable and welcome in their schools and in their classrooms. Our job is to teach students, and we can't do that if they feel that they have to hide who they are from their classmates and from their teachers. So the only time that this became political was when people who were opposed to the existence of LGBTQ people made it political.
So the district responded by saying parents have the right to opt out of readings, future readings. Is that an appropriate step?
I don't think so. I think that children need to learn about the world that they actually live in. That world includes LGBTQ people. It includes people of different races and religions. And it includes people of varying abilities. And we aren't preparing our students for the future if we don't include the identities of all types of people in their classrooms, especially when one of their peers is one of those identities. They need to know that that child is just as welcome and included in the classroom as everyone else. And so, no, I don't think that people should be able to opt out of reading about individuals who are different than they are.
Let's move on to Gay Straight Alliance Clubs, or GSAs as they're known. Why are they important, one, in Utah schools, and how many are there across the state?
So we don't have a real accurate count of how many GSAs exist in Utah right now. They ebb and flow with each school year because it's up to individual students to start and maintain these clubs, which is a lot of pressure on a high school aged student. They are, however, incredibly important for a school's climate and culture, and they benefit not just the individual students who might attend that club, but every student in a school benefits from schools having these clubs. We know that there's less bullying, less racism, less instances of harassment in schools that have GSAs, and so we believe that the existence of GSAs is critical to having positive, welcoming school climates.
And it's all about understanding as the underlying goal?
Exactly.
Okay. What about the pandemic? Did that play a role on these clubs? I would imagine it probably did have an adverse impact.
Absolutely. The pandemic has had I mean, we don't know the effect on our children yet, but some students were able to find a lot more community online than maybe they had prior to the pandemic, and a lot of other students were incredibly isolated and taken away from the only supports that they had, which existed in their schools.
I'm curious, do you have any insight on some of the straight students who participate in these clubs and what you're hearing from them?
You know, overall, I think that straight students who participate in these clubs are kids who are interested in making sure that their friends and their family members feel supported and welcome. You know, they're kids who are like me, who believe that civil rights are important and that everybody deserves to be represented and to feel comfortable in their world. And these are the kids who tend to lead the charge because they're dealing with the least amount of resistance in their lives.
Dig into that a little more. The representation and inclusion of LGBTQ plus characters and figures in the classroom. Why do you believe that's important?
When students see representations of themselves as successful adults, as contributors to the history of this country, then they see their place in the world. So as a woman who grew up you know, in our public schools, when I learned about female scientists or female mathematicians or female astronauts, then I was able to better envision myself as one of those careers that's generally not open to women. When LGBTQ students see themselves existing in the world, period, then they're able to envision themselves as part of having a future. And quite frankly, when we erase those identities from our classrooms, then we erase a hope for a future from our students. And that can't be an ethical choice in our Utah schools.
That's a really good point I'm glad you hit on, because we all know youth suicide is a huge problem in the state of Utah, but it really hits the LGBTQ community even harder. And I think that's what you're talking about there as well. Okay, FAM will be holding a rally tomorrow. Tell us a little bit about the purpose of that event and what your organization hopes to accomplish.
So 2021 has been the worst year for anti-LGBTQ legislation introduced across the nation. In Utah, we saw not only LGBTQ students attacked in Murray School District and other school districts across the state, but also on the, inside of our state legislature. Students spent a large part of the school year being scared of COVID, being scared of their rights being taken away by parent groups and also by our state government. And while we are so grateful that we did not pass some of those really hateful laws, we want to make sure that our students know that there are adults and there are individuals who are standing beside them, who are standing behind them, and who will stand in front of them, quite frankly, when they need protection. And so this is a pep rally where we are cheering on our students, we are telling them that we love them and that we support them, and we're celebrating all of the wonderful things that they contribute to our schools.
Yeah, I know 2 bills in particular were quite controversial, both failed. But they will be, at least one of them will be coming back. Appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Welcome to our third and final In Focus discussion tonight on inclusion of LGBTQ students here in Utah schools. Joining us now to finish it off is Bianca Mittendorf, who is part of the leadership team for Friends, Allies, and Mentors, or FAM, of the LGBTQ community. Bianca, thanks for your time tonight and your contribution to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Digging into the data now, you've had a chance to look over some data or statistics when it comes to LGBTQ plus students here in Utah. What did you find? What are the key takeaways?
One of the biggest pieces of information that we gleaned from the 2019 SHARP survey is that roughly 11 to 12% of our students in Utah schools are identifying as LGBTQ. Unfortunately, we really don't have a lot of comprehensive data that's been gathered to support those findings or help enhance them. There's been a lot of studies done through GLSEN and different organizations like that, but not a lot. We need a lot more.
And what can that do? What would the data and statistics tell us?
That would obviously give us an opportunity to hone in on some of the practices or anti-bullying practices we may already have instilled in schools. That's an opportunity to fine-tune them, as well as to find out from our students where the gaps are, where they're not feeling safe, our LGBTQ students, when they come into the building.
That graph we just saw with the 11.9% who identify as LGBTQ, that's from the state of Utah, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And do you make the assumption that it's really more than that because some are still afraid to come out at this time?
Yes, absolutely. I think it definitely could be that. It's a really, I've just seen some numbers that say 90% of students, according to a 2019 GLSEN survey, are saying that they're hearing gay or lesbian being thrown around as a slur almost. So I'm very certain that there are students who are not comfortable fully identifying.
We asked Dr. Martin this question, but I'd like to get your insight on it as well. Why is representation and inclusion of LGBTQ characters and figures important in the classroom, do you think?
Basically, when students can see themselves represented in curriculum, just as Dr. Martin said, they have a sense of where they are in the world and where they can go. And really it's our job as educators to provide that to students and make sure we're not providing this overly sanitized version that leaves out their identities, right?
So what type of an impact does that then have on an LGBTQ plus student when they are included in curriculum within the classroom?
Honestly, I think it just increases their sense of belonging, their sense of self-worth, and just makes them feel not only are they being told that, we respect you, but it's actually being backed up by actions.
And how do you believe that fits within the mission of your organization, and even take it a step further, the Constitution of the state of Utah?
Well, FAM is all about promoting the inclusivity of our LGBTQ students and making sure that they're visible. And our Utah Constitution says that schools should be open to all. So to me, quite frankly, it's really a perfect marriage of our kind of what our mission statement is and the Utah Constitution.
So we talked a little bit about this during the break. When I was in school 30 years ago, kids, LGBTQ students did not feel comfortable coming out at the time. I have classmates who have since, and you look back at that and it just was not a safe space. So there has been some progress, but still more needs to be done. What would you like to see happen moving forward?
Honestly, I think one of the biggest things that needs to be done is, you know, there's a lot of talk about and movement around wanting to be inclusive and wanting to support students of different races. And I think true equity work only happens when everyone who has a marginalized identity is supported and feels like they belong. And so for our LGBTQ youth, that's what I would like to see happen in our schools.
We've been talking about this rally for tomorrow. Tell us what you can about the event and how people can participate, and more importantly, where can they find more information if they would like to do so?
Yeah, great question. So tomorrow, excuse me, I'm losing my days of the week. Yes, tomorrow we'll be having our FAM rally, which is basically an event that is just designed to kind of pump up our LGBTQ youth, to let them know that there are people in this state that love them, that they are not invisible, that they are human beings and they need to be supported. And we're here to show them that, and we're going to come out in force and show them. So.
And where would be a good place to find more information for anyone who would like to do so?
UtahFam.org is our website.
Okay.
They can also find us on Instagram and Facebook.
All right, that's really easy. Bianca, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.